Libby thinks she's missing a kitten. Striped kitten. Here.
Hi there. Yes, this is Beth Green, and this is Granny Rocks, and that is James. Oh, I don't have my microphone on.
Yeah, yes, this is James Mead.
James, I don't have my microphone on.
No.
Hi there. Again, yes, this is Beth Green. And this is the Granny Rock Show. And you are in the right place at the right time. It's we who were not in the right place at the right time. But we are now. Okay. So I am actually very excited to do this show, even though it looks like I'm being very negligent. Because tonight I'm talking about courage. And
courage?
Courage. And the name of the show is Courage is a Muscle.
Oh.
And you can grow it.
I like the sound of that.
So I'm glad that you do like the sound of that, and this thing is in the way. Excuse me for a moment. Don't ask why we're late. It's all our own doing. So, first I want to talk about what courage is and, what gives us courage. But first I do want to start out by talking about how courage is something that can grow, because a lot of people feel like, okay, well, I'm courageous in this area, but I'm not courageous in that area. For example, I would rather meet 17 angry pit bulls or German shepherds or any strong dog than have to talk to my mother-in-law. You know what I mean? So people are aware that they have areas where they are more courageous than others. Now, but a lot of people, and I'm not talking about you necessarily, but a lot of people feel discouraged about themselves. They feel like they are not courageous, which is kind of what you were saying, James, a minute ago. And they're down on themselves about it. So I'm not going to spend the night talking about why we lack courage, because I want to talk more about what it is and how we can develop it so you can be happier with yourself, which is the most important thing. So first of all, what is courage? Oh, it looks like we already have...
We have some comments here. Tracy says hello and great topic and sends lots of caring. The same back at you.
Thank you. Okay.
And then
yes,
we have a big hello from Amy, and she sends love and music.
Hello
Amy.
Love
Same
back.
to you.
And music back.
Amy also says, I'm happy to hear that courage can grow and isn't limited to where we already feel courageous. And Todd says, hi, Beth and James. I agree. Great topic.
Excellent. Thank you. I've actually been thinking about this topic today, believe it or not. Actually thinking. I don't usually think about my topics, but this one, yes, I thought about it. So first of all, I want to sort of define courage. This is how I'm defining it. You don't have to define it this way. It's the willingness and ability to do things whose consequences we fear.
Ooh.
And because if you have no fear, you don't need courage.
Oh.
So there is no such thing as courage without fear. Now, you may be fearless. Some people, have had a lobotomy, for example, that may have impacted their fear center and they don't feel fear. They don't need courage. They just do it and they don't have to face things. But it's, the courage is when you have fear and you do it anyway. And that's really what it is. And now I want to talk about different kinds of courage first. First of all, of course, there is physical courage, of which I have none. So, if there was a bully in the schoolyard and he was going after people, I might yell at him, but I'm certainly not going to take the first punch. And there's a very good reason for that, because the first punch would be the last. So, because I haven't got the capacity to follow up. I don't have courage in those situations because I know that I can't do anything about it. So I think this is something I want you to keep in mind as I'm talking about this topic, that sometimes we don't think that we have the capacity to follow through and do what it takes in order to be courageous. And so I want to take you off the hook right away. Off the hook. Okay, now, supposing you're saying, oh, well, here is a guy, a motorcycle driver, professional, who can jump over 15 cars. Okay, and that takes courage. Oh, and it looks like we have.
Oh, yes, and Elizabeth says hello and sends a heart of love.
Hello,
Same to
Elizabeth.
you, Elizabeth.
So what about the guy who jumps over
15
cars, is that courage? Well, it may be that he has physical courage. He's willing to face the consequences of crashing, and often did, right? However, that may not be courage. That may be obsession, the need to prove something about myself. And that is driving me beyond my fear, not through courage, but because I can't stop myself. It's like drinking, where you're like addicted to it. You're not drinking somebody under the table because you have courage. It's you're compelled by your addiction. And so sometimes people are addicted to risk taking or to proving something or showing off or whatever it is. So don't confuse that with courage. In that case, it might be more courageous for the person to say, I'm not doing that anymore. Then they're confronting something in themselves. But I'll get more into that later. So, you see, it may take more courage to stop doing something or refuse to do something than to do it. And we may have that upside down in our heads. Right?
Yeah.
Now let's talk about another kind of courage that I do have some of, which is moral courage. Moral courage requires us to stand up to something or somebody despite our fear of consequences. And that is moral courage. And we may just simply refuse to listen to some authority figure. We may refuse to agree. Often, moral courage is required for us to stand up to something that everybody in our environment or our social circle or in our group agree to. And what are we risking there? Now we're not risking broken bones. We're risking being outside the tribe. We're risking being alone. We're risking humiliation. We're risking, and by the way, being outside the tribe is not just an emotional thing. It can be a financial thing too. It's like, oh yeah, I know a cousin, my cousin, and there's, and I know this guy, and you know what I mean, and you're in the tribe, and you know what I mean. Hector said, come and see me sometime. So, for me to stand up to that guy and to everybody who agrees with something means I could not only lose friendship, but I could also lose companionship, obviously, but I could also lose financial security. And a lot of...
Especially if you stand up to the boss.
Oh, my God, that's another kind of courage where we are standing up to the boss. But that's something different. I'm talking about standing up to a friend. So, for example, if all of your friends are Democrats, it might take courage to be a Republican. On the other hand, if you're among Republicans, it might take courage to say, well, you know, I really do like Joe Biden. In fact, it might take courage for you to say that with your friends who are Democrats if it's not popular. So standing up to the popular can not only disrupt your sense of safety in terms of your emotional life and your social life and all your friendships and everything, and maybe your wife will hate you, but it can also impact your financial security. Now, James brought up another example, which is a good example, standing up to authority. Authority can get you. I've seen it many times because I have stood up to authority a lot.
Because they have power.
They have power. And that's true. So it takes courage to stand up to authority. And I'm going to talk about what gives us that courage in a minute. But before I get into what gives us power, are you hanging on the edge of your seat?
I want to know.
You want to know.
I want to know.
Good.
I want to know how we grow more courage.
I'm going to tell you. I'm going to try to tell you because I'm going to try to figure it out too. The most important form of courage is the courage to stand up to ourselves.
Mm.
What the heck do I mean by standing up to myself? Well, it's really not that complicated. I will give you a very simple example. Stand up to my desire to eat that chocolate cake. Stand up to my desire to gamble, to drink, to use drugs, to placate. Those are aspects of myself. Stand up to my own desire to acquiesce, my own need to be popular, my own need to be admired. Oh my God, I have to stand up to all of that. And I have to be willing to look at these behaviors and say, is this really good? Is this really healthy? And a lot of times these behaviors are shameful. Oh, so I have to be willing to tell myself, stand up to myself and say, look at this. Try not to feel shame. Just try to understand, why am I like this? Feel compassion and all that, right? Those are very important factors that will enable us to stand up to ourselves and examine behaviors that we may have been doing since early childhood. And you may be running away from even acknowledging that you're doing it because it feels so painful and shameful, right? Or we may feel threatened if we look at these patterns. So the courage to stand up to our egos that are driving us to do things that hurt ourselves and other people. Say, no, you will not buy that thing that you think is going to fix your problems because it's not going to fix your problems, plus you can't afford it. No, so that's another way that we have to stand up to ourselves. But we have to stand up to ourselves constantly if we're going to be looking at ourselves and our behavior and trying to grow. Now, so what gives us courage?
Yes. What gives us courage?
Well, faith, conviction, necessity, and support. Mm-hmm. Okay, now, what do I mean by that? Sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? Well, what do I mean by faith? I don't mean by faith having a religious belief system. Now, You may have a religious belief system that gives you faith and gives you courage, and that's fine. But for a lot of people, that religious system is one of the things you have to stand up to, because there's a lot of beliefs and dogma in a lot of religious and spiritual belief systems that are anti-human, hogwash, delusional, and so on. We may even have to stand up to that. So religion may not be the form of faith that's going to give us what we need. But when I say faith, I mean some abiding sense that we're going to be okay. You know, even if you're deluding yourself, if you can say to yourself, you know, this is going to be okay.
Even if it's just as simple as, I will survive this.
I will survive. You know, my mother used to say, this too shall pass. And she was right, because at the very worst, I'm going to die someday. So faith that it's going to work out. And faith is not just that it's going to work out, but faith that I am going to be able to handle it. That if I do the dreaded thing and say something to my mother-in-law that she doesn't like, and they don't invite me to Christmas anymore, or whatever, or they get on my husband or wife or significant other or whatever, non-binary, them, well, I have faith in myself that I can survive that I can look at this and say, oh, too bad about that woman. I'm so sorry for her. That she's so narrow-minded that she doesn't want to hear the truth. Oh my. See, that takes a lot of faith in ourselves. I can cope. I will cope. So faith in ourselves, faith that somehow things do work out one way or the other, just and like flowing into it. And part of that faith, by the way, is one of my favorite sayings, which is to turn S-T, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on the internet, into fertilizer. We're talking about feces into fertilizer, right? If I have experienced myself rising above insurmountable problems or figuring out a way to confront issues and make them beneficial for everybody, to turn shit into fertilizer, I said it, to turn shit, well then I'm going to have much more faith in myself. And by having more faith, I will automatically have more courage. Because it's like, okay, what's the worst she's going to do? Not invite us to Christmas? You know what I mean? Or I'm going to lose my job. And then, yeah, well, you know, not the best thing in the world, but, you know, the jobs report's pretty good these days. So, you know, maybe I can get another job, or maybe I'm supposed to retire, or whatever it is, or maybe I'm supposed to start my own business, you see. Can I take this situation that feels so threatening and turn it into something beneficial? That gives me the courage to confront things and to do things that I would not normally have or do. Now, one more way that courage is grown is conviction. This is so important. I believe this so deeply that I don't care about the consequences. I'm just going for it. And you know, the stronger your conviction, the more courage you will have to face whatever you have to face, whatever loss might happen, because you have deep conviction about this. Like, you know, you look at people like the Indian people when they were fighting the British Empire, and they were just standing there non-violently. Same thing in our own South. People had incredible conviction about what they were doing, and it gave them courage. They looked superhuman, but they weren't any different from you or me. They had come to a place where they felt absolutely that this needed to be done, and you just do it. And you know, if you look at that, sometimes when you have somebody you feel responsible for, you know, a child's life is at stake or something, you suddenly discover that you have an incredible amount of courage. You know, you will go after. I hate to blame dogs because I love dogs, but you know, if you're in a situation where your child is being attacked by a dog or a coyote or something, you may find yourself, or a bear, God forbid, you know, you may find yourself absolutely such a strong conviction that something has to be done and you're the only one who can do it. And you just do it. And that is courage. You have the courage, but it comes out of a deep sense of conviction. And there's so much in our world today that I can point to, that you can point to, that's so wrong, that is so hurtful, that you might discover that you, with that conviction, will get out there on the line, the picket line. What about all of our forefathers and mothers and for non-binaries who fought for the union movement, who had, incredible brutality against them? I'm just giving examples in our own nation. I know this is true around the world. Everywhere where people live and where there is power oppressing them, there are terrible things that need to be confronted. And sometimes your conviction that this needs to be dealt with will carry you forward and give you the courage to act despite your fear. I didn't say that you become fearless, but you're acting despite your fear. Now, another thing that builds our courage, builds that muscle, is necessity. You know, I've seen people go through horrible physical, medical treatments. And I said, oh my God, I could never do that. I could never do that. And how did they do it? Well, they said, if I don't do this, I'm going to die. And sometimes you're so sick, you're so tired, you say, I don't care, I'd rather die, and I'm not afraid of that, and that's fine. But sometimes you have to go through some awful things. If you feel it's absolutely necessary, you will probably do it. And I'm going to ask if we have any time left at the end of the show to think about some examples. I want you to be thinking about examples of when you had faith in yourself that you could cope, of when you felt such strong conviction you did it despite your fear, when you were down to the wire and it was totally necessary. It's like you're going to die or someone else is going to die if you don't take action. And finally, I want to mention support. Now, it takes a great deal of inner strength and courage to face things with no support. But once you do, you know you can. And your sense of yourself begins to change from, oh, I'm a mouse, I can't do this, I have no courage, just do it once. And you'll say, ooh, look at me, I did that. If I did it once, I can do it again.
So is that how you grow the muscle of courage? By repeating and having a growing sense of confidence?
Exactly. There are 4 ways you grow the muscle. One is have more faith. Think about situations that seemed absolutely devastating, daunting, impossible. You'd never manage, and somehow you coped. You know, think about times that you did that and say, that is me. That's me. I always think of myself as weak in this area, but what about this? Look what I did. So yes, that's me. And secondly, think about something where you had such a strong conviction about something that you stood up to the other kids. You saw the kids bullying somebody or tormenting a disabled a child or being racist or something, and you couldn't help yourself, and your mouth opened, and you found you had courage. Think of those incidents. Remember that's you too. Third is to remember all the times that you faced things because it was necessary. It had to be done. You know, a lot of children who were born into families where the parents were addicts and weren't available, those kids made dinner, you know, took care of things, called 911 for their parents. They had to. It was a necessity. So now take a moment to think about the times when you rose to the occasion because of a necessity for someone else's benefit or for your own. And you said, oh my God, how did I do that? How did I do that? How did I leave home? How did I ever leave home, right? My parents' house, right? How did I face this? How did I leave my husband, my wife? How did I stand up to my best friend? How did I quit that job? How did I? You can't tell me. How did I take that risk, that risk, that risk, right? You know, you cannot tell me that you never have, because I know you have. If you're alive and you're listening to this show, you have shown courage and out of necessity. And now I just want to talk about that last form, which is support. If you are lucky enough, you have support. You have at least one person or one dog or cat or rabbit or something, hamster, who you can turn to for comfort when you feel like the whole world is going to turn against you if you do something. And they say yes. Oh, we see.
Oh, we have a message here from Ilan, who says, much love, sends multiple hearts and a big smile.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ilan.
Thank you. I hope you're getting something from this show too. So I really want to say something. We're really getting to the end of this show. Before I absolutely conclude, let me remind you, this is Granny Raps and Rocks, wit, uncommon sense, and music. I used to call it Granny Rocks, but I also rap. So anyway, that's what we're calling it, Granny Raps and Rocks, because I'm always changing the names of things. So we broadcast every Wednesday night at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. So if you're here live, you can always chat. But if you come afterwards, I'm always delighted to hear from you. I ask you to please like and love this show, and please share it with others. People need courage now. And I want to say one really wrap-up thing, because we're going to have to wrap up. The time flew as usual. Part of necessity is not just that I'm going to die because, I have to cope with this situation. Like when some rapist came in my window and held me at knife point and tied me up with electrical wire and blindfolded me. And I had a conversation with him because that's what I needed in order to survive the night. And we were talking for 3 hours as I was shaking and terrified. Now, how did I do that? I had to. I had no choice. It's either that or I would scream, and he already told me that if I screamed, he would kill me. So I didn't feel like dying that night. But I also want to say that there's another kind of necessity about courage, which is if I am going to hate myself if I don't do that, that is necessity. And if you don't have any support, try to find some, whatever it is, even if it's reading a biography of somebody that you admire who faced things like yours, or a movie or something like that, or try to find a friend or call somebody on the phone. At the very least, call upon your higher power if you have one. Get the support you need, but get the support you need from yourself to confront things you're afraid of, because if you don't, the consequence is worse than anything else you could experience at any other person's hand, because you won't love yourself, you won't respect yourself. Oh my God, what's worse than that, really? Well, maybe being tortured in the Spanish Inquisition, being on the rack and having people pull your fingernails out. Okay, I admit that. I don't have that kind of physical courage. I would say, okay, I'll tell you the truth, whatever it is. I don't know anything. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be ridiculous and exaggerate and think that, you're going to be courageous at all times. But what I'm saying is, if there are so many things that are social, psychological, that have to do with our society, that you will hate yourself if you don't stand up. I know a woman, a lovely, lovely woman who grew up in Alabama, a white woman, and she said she didn't have anything to do with, she was alive during the civil rights movement, and she just tried to pretend it wasn't happening. And she still blamed herself years and years later, right? Whereas if she had stood up to her parents and to her society, she would have felt like, wow, look at me, I'm somebody. And as you do that, you begin to feed that wonderful part of you where your courage actually is rooted in your sense of self-knowledge, in your faith in yourself, in your belief that what you're doing is right, out of the necessity to take a stand, and out of conviction. And that's how you can grow your courage too. So again, please like this show, love the show, share the show. People need this message. Our world is a mess, and we need to stand up to traditions and ways of thinking that are killing us all.
Yes, now's the time, because these are the times that try men's and women's souls.
That's right. So thank you so much, and we'll see. Leave your comment. We'll see you next week, and don't forget tomorrow night. It's Magical Improvs night, where James and I improvise simultaneously, and we have lots of fun.
Piano and vocals.
We do. See, that took some courage. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye for now. Thanks for coming.